lives.
The NRA is among the most powerful political lobbying groups in the country. It wasn't always so. It was founded in the late 1800s as a haven for marksmen. And it actually wasn't until the 1970s that the NRA emerged as a political force. And boy, have they been a force since then. Joining me to discuss, Dan Gross, president of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, and Sam Stein of the Huffington Post. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
Dan, I'll go to you first. The foundation of these remarks were perpetuating a lot of anxiety about the need for guns and self-defense, saying, quote, that his members that he's been talking to have never been worried about the country in the way that they are now before this time. Do you think that that's grounded in fact? Is there a rise in violence that people need to defend against?
No, it couldn't be any less grounded. In fact, the results of the NRA's political agenda are the only thing that's creating the violence that everybody seems to be so scared about.
And what about his perpetuating some anxiety about the erosion of rights?
Yeah, that's their strategy. You know, the paranoid, fear-mongering, wrapping it in the rights and freedom of the American people and of the rank-and-file NRA members. The reality is, and we have to remember, what he's up there promoting is nothing more than the agenda of the corporate gun lobby, and that's really what this is about. And drumming up, that fear and paranoia. I would call it delusional if it weren't so calculated. And that's what the rest of the American public, the 90% of Americans who support not taking guns out of the hands of the good guys and gals, as he says, but keeping them out of the hands of dangerous people through things like background checks, which includes the overwhelming majority of NRA members themselves, the rank-and-file NRA members. That's what we need to realize. Our issue isn't with the people that are in the audience there, the people, who might don hunting camouflage. Our issue is with the people in the suits who are buying our politicians to perpetuate this agenda of the corporate gun lobby.
And let's get to the corporate backing of all of this in a moment. But first, Sam, I wanted to get your reaction to his sort of conflating the gun control issue with a number of other PR debacles that the government has faced of late. He linked it to the NSA scandal. He linked it to violations of privacy, calling it, quote, a corruption of trust. Is that a strategically smart move on his part?
I think it's proven to be strategically smart. I think the NRA at this point is as powerful, if not more powerful, than at any point during the Obama administration. The problem that Wayne LaPierre faces is that during the first term, he had a pretty good boogeyman, which was that he would say, in the next term, when President Obama is unhinged problems of re-election, he will come and he will get your guns. And he doesn't have that necessarily in the second term. Obviously, the president is not going to be able to run for re-election, so he needs to create a few more other things, a few more other boogeymen for people to get fearful about. And in this case, at this speech specifically, it was a variety of policies, all with the underpinning that the government is expanding to dangerous degrees and that you need to have and preserve your right to defend yourself against the government. And so he brought in health care, he brought in the IRS, the NSA, et cetera, et cetera. All of it is done for the primary purpose of convincing people that they should stock up on firearms.
And you mentioned that the group is more powerful than it's ever been.
Yeah.
That extends to the money. According to the Center for Responsive Politics, the NRA ranks in the top 6 of the country's political organizations in terms of money spent in a number of categories: political contributions, lobbying, outside spending.
Sure.
How much of the NRA's influence comes from that robust cash flow?
I would actually say not as much as is often reported. The NRA's power tends to be that its members are incredibly motivated and tend to be motivated on a singular issue, and that's gun rights. The NRA can spend a lot of money, but what's far more effectual for them is to have people call up their congressional or their member of Congress's office and petition them on any piece of legislation. So during the debate over background checks, for instance, it's true that the polls had 80 to 85 to 90% of people supporting background checks. The problem was that the vast majority of phone calls, the vast majority of letters that members of Congress were receiving were from those people who were opposed to the idea. And that's the NRA's power, is that they can motivate their base better than basically any other interest group in the country.
And maybe the money angle is overplayed by some of the press, but certainly it's a concern for the opposition groups. I'll go to you on that, Dan. The NRA's last annual revenues were $256 million, which really dwarfs the opposition groups. Your group, the Brady Center, which is one of the largest and most significant, had $3.8 million in the same year. So there's a huge gulf here. Is this fight winnable given those stakes?
Yeah, well, actually, we had $10 million. last year. And, you know, there are really exciting things happening on our side of the issue, not the least of which is Mayor Bloomberg's extraordinary commitment of $50 million.
Do you think that'll be a game changer?
I think that, combined with the money that Gabby Giffords and Mark Kelly are bringing to this issue, the continued spending that, you know, in a big way that Brady plans on this issue, I think it's the aggregate of all those things that actually, even on a financial level, puts us on an even playing field. But very importantly, we need to do a better job on our side of the issue communicating to the American public what this issue is really about, which is the influence of the corporate gun lobby. That's our not only boogeyman, because boogeyman implies that it's unjustified, it's our real enemy, and we need to expose that in broad daylight, what the corporate gun lobby is doing to influence the vote of politicians. Wayne LaPierre in his speech talked about all the dishonesty in Washington, D.C. in politics. You know, the most dishonest politicians, I would contend, are the ones that are at this event.
And look, call it dishonest or honest, certainly it is on major display that there are a lot of gun vendors and gun manufacturers and sellers there at that conference. We'll be watching your fight on this in the coming days and months. Dan Gross and Sam Stein, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ronan.
Next up on RF Daily, toxic waste.